How's the sound? Okay, today we're going to talk about the MKS Gen L version 2. So I'm going to grab one. So here's the board. Now let's examine it to see what we got here, because there might be some special settings on it. Right now I have it set to 3.3 volt logic, and I'm not using ISP boot, and I have no jumpers on it for Wi-Fi at the moment. But we're going to experiment with the actual loading of firmware again. There seems to be an issue. Right now I'm using an 8 gigabit card on this. I'll show you real quick. Let me zoom in on this. Hang on a second, I gotta change a setting. Apparently that setting doesn't want to change right now. Interesting. Okay, well, so much for zooming in today. I may have to reset the camera, so give me 2 seconds just to power cycle it and power it back on. There we go. So this is what I'm using for the actual drive. It's Gigastone, and it's an 8 gigabit drive. So let's see how we can do with the actual loading here. I know some people have been having trouble with it. Let me just see if I can bring up Discord real quick. Okay, so I haven't gotten the files from the person yet, but I'm going to try the 8 gigabit drive, but I'm going to actually pop it back out, and I'm first going to format it, and we're going to see what's going on with the formatting, and I'll check on the chat in just a second. Let me plug that in, and let's go over to the desktop. And currently on my drive, you can see that there's a firmware.bin and a firmware.cur. There might be a special build thing going on because that's supposed to actually change. So let's plug it back in and see if it's working first of all. So let me go over to the screen here for a second. There's some reason it's not loading, and that's a little bit unsettling. It might be that I have a COM port wrong. So let's see what's going on. So we can hear that it's actually trying to connect. Now let's see what it looks like. So right here it says firmware.cur. So that loaded on 602.24 and changed. That could be the same file that we were looking for a second ago. So I'm going to pull it out and then insert it into the computer and see what's going on, because there might be something weird happening here. So let's see what we got here. Put this in here, drop it in the computer, and let's go back and see what the actual desktop looks like. So in here, it looks like it just loaded. So that's okay. Now we know what's going on there. So now I want to try something, but I need to check on something. So I'm going to go over to the website for Big Tree Tech, or excuse me, not Big Tree Tech, MakerBase. So I'm going to search, hang on a second here, on MakerBase, GitHub, and MKS Gen L v2. And that should bring us to where we want to go. And they have like not a manual here like other people, but they do have a wiki. So let's go through and see what their wiki says. Whoop, user manual, that's new. So it's a wiki. So wiring, pinouts, different hardware, video tutorials, frequently asked or frequently asked questions on videos. Interesting. What's this about? Diode burnout. Let's see. Solving the problem with non-MKS motherboards. This doesn't look like very much. So let's go back and see if we can find some information. So we'll go and search this way. MKS Gen L. And let's check to see if there's anything on hardware. Looks like there might be multiple versions of the hardware, I'm not sure. But let's see what we can find in here. Just want to make sure the hardware matches what we're working with. It does say MKS. It does say the actual integrated circuit power. So everything matches in this configuration for the -2. So let's see if we can check at the other one, which is back a directory, and see if this is different. So it looks pretty much the same. So I don't know what's going on, if there's a difference in those changes. But let's see if they have information on other stuff. Firmware. So it's 2.0.6 they have for firmware. So let's click on this for a second. And in here they have a config.h and an advanced. So let's do the config.h. I just want to see what their settings are. So essentially I'm looking for this setting right here, just to make sure I'm set correctly. And also the board type they're using and the speed they're using. Now they also are using something else. This could be a TFT display or Wi-Fi, I'm not sure which. But those are some of the default settings they make in their software. So let's try and load it first with our regular configuration. But I'm going to check on my GitHub real quick here, or not my GitHub, my Discord, just to see what's going on here. Okay, nothing at the moment. So let's go give it a try. So inside VS Code, I'm going to open the version of Marlin that I downloaded from here, and I'll show you that real quick. Inside Marlin, we go marlinfw.org, and we go to downloads. This is the current download I'm using. We also have bug fix. Now, obviously there are things that can occur. If you're not sure what's going wrong, you can always go to reporting an issue. If you think you have a problem like software doesn't load or firmware.bin not loading, you can check to see if there's an issue here. There may be or there may not be, but that's one good way to check, is to actually search on it. Usually there's something on TMC, and let's see what we've got. So there's a bunch of issues on the TMC for sensorless homing failing when PSU default off is enabled. That's power supply unit. So there's a lot of other issues that you can look up. I obviously don't know them all, but that's just a good reference source. But let's go back to VS Code and try this again. So in VS Code, I'm going to first plug in the actual drive that I'm using into the computer, which you've already seen. And then I'm going to actually load it manually first. So I'll show you one of the mistakes you can make that can cause your life grief. So if I click here and I go to folder open, go to downloads, Marlin 2.0, Marlin 2.0 select folder. And then I go to the Marlin folder, source, core, boards.h, and search on MKS _ sGen. It'll bring us to the sGen L, but that's not the one we're using. We're actually using this one down here. So I'm going to copy that. Note that it's LPC 1769 because I'm going to do this very quick. So I'm going to go to the configuration, search on motherboard, paste it over the old configuration. I'm going to leave this at 0 instead of -1, just so you can see what happens. And that's the only change I'm making in this file except for the platform.io.ini. So I'll click on this and I'll search on the MKS Gen L, and I can't find it, so I'll do MKS. I am searching, I think. Oh, I actually know what this is. It's LPC 1769. 1769. So it's a common chip. So I'm just going to do a regular build with the checkbox. And this may take a few seconds. It might fail because I did a build just before that, but you can watch in here and see what's occurring and being added. But it should generate a binary file if it's successful. So inside here we have our binary, so I'm going to right click on that and I'm going to select Reveal in Explorer. Then I'm going to right click again and I'm going to send it to the USB drive. We'll confirm it's there, which it is, and then we'll go back over to the desktop, and I'm basically doing this to show you what can happen. So I'm going to take that out, I'm going to place it in the drive here, and then I'm going to flash it. So as you can see, it's flashing over here. It's saying that it's connecting, disconnecting with that little ding. So now let's go back over to the computer and see what happens in Pronterface. So if I go over to Pronterface, which I don't have open, give me a second to get that actually visible. There we go. So inside Pronterface, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to try and connect, but I don't know what the connection is yet. So what I'm going to have to do is go to Device Manager and open that up. And inside here, I'm going to check to see what the COM port is. It's 10. So I need to set that because it's not going to be in the drop down usually, but it is today apparently. So I'm going to connect, and it's not connecting. See how it's saying connecting, but it doesn't say printer is now online? That has to do with the -1 not being set. So I'm going to basically go back to VS Code, and I'm going to go to configuration.h, and I'm just going to change this to -1. So that's the only change I'm making to try and fix this. And then I'm going to recompile, and while that's recompiling, I'll go over to the workbench for a second, disconnect here, pull this out, place it into this drive, and then connect it to the computer. Then we'll go back and check on VS Code, and it just popped. So let's find the actual build. Should be in here. Let's right click, we'll do Reveal in Explorer, right click again, send to the D drive. We'll check on the D drive, it's there right now. Note the time and the time on my computer match. So we're going to go back over to the computer's desktop for a second. We're going to pop out the drive. We're going to insert it over here, and we're going to connect it. It's flashing as we speak down here. So now we're going to go over to Pronterface, and we're going to try and connect. And now it says connecting, printer is now online. So let's see if we can actually load some firmware now from the actual drive. So I'm going to check on the desktop to see what I have here. So I can see the drive at the moment, on the computer while it's plugged in via USB. Now, if you're using a really long USB cable or a broken one, you might have issues. So right now mine is about 3 feet long. If you go up to 6 feet, you can get failures, or if you daisy chain through another one, you could get failures. The reason I'm saying this is these are things that occur that I've actually tripped over. Usually it's 3 USB cords before you have an issue, but I just wanted to make you aware of that. So I'm going to go to VS Code again, and we're going to check something very simple, but I want to actually show you something in Pronterface before I do that. So in Pronterface, we have nothing connected. I'm going to do an M119, which checks the end stops. Notice how they all say triggered? Nothing's connected, that's why it says that. But I'm going to show you something in VS Code now. So inside VS Code, this is just to help to confirm that we loaded something. I'm going to search on invert, and I'm going to change the logic of one of our end stops to true. So this should come up as open instead of triggered. So I'm going to reload it this time with the actual upload button with that one change. And I'll look at the chat while this is occurring. Well, seems kind of quiet today. So let's see what we got here. So it's almost done. We'll go over and we'll check the actual desktop to make sure that we can see what's going on. So we have firmware.bin. So we know it actually pushed over to the actual SD card. We also can check the actual formatting of this, I believe, by going over here. And you can see that it says FAT32. So this drive is actually an 8 gigabit drive. I've not tried over 32-bit. I couldn't find one before we started. I may have one someplace, but I'll probably have to order one to test this. But as the drive gets larger, there might be issues, but I'm not sure yet until I actually try it. So I'll be ordering one soon to check that. But let's go over to the workbench and I'll show you what's going on here. I'm going to disconnect, then I'm going to reconnect, and you can see that it's actually flashing. So now that that's complete, we'll go over to Pronterface, and in Pronterface we'll double check to see what happened with the M119. We can't do it until we connect, so I disconnect, connect, now try it. And it says open. So we did load firmware. So we know that for sure, and we know that it worked via that way of loading. If I could find a 32 gigabit drive, I would try this, but I'm not sure I have one on hand. So I'll have to do that later in the week when a new one arrives. But there may be an issue with larger drives. I know 120 megabit drives have issues sometimes. I think people have seen me go through it multiple times where I've had issues, but I just wanted to point that out. So does anybody else have any other questions, comments, concerns? You got this board with your Ender 3 recently and you've been stumbling around trying to get it to work. I understand that feeling. I've stumbled around myself. The connection error, okay, I'm trying to make sure I'm not stumbling over two different ones here. So kept getting this connection error. What's the connection error you're seeing? And then the other question is, on my sGen L V1, my SD card doesn't show up as a mass storage device on my computer. I've tried several different SD cards and different computers with different operating systems. Let's try the sGen L1 and see what happens. So I'm going to disconnect this, move it over here, and see if I can find one. So here's an sGen L, version 1, I believe. Nope, that's a Nano. Sorry. That's slightly different. That's a 2. Sorry, I've got so many boards here, I get confused easy. Here we go. That looks like a Gen L. Sorry about that. Wow, I'm confusing myself with hardware. That's not good. And finally, the last one I picked is the sGen L. So the drive in this one, I believe, is 128. So if we look at it, it's actually 8 gig in this particular situation. So I'm going to drop this in, see if it comes up. I would say it was something with the jumpers, but there's no jumper for USB on this board. It just auto switches. There is on the SKR for certain boards, like the SKR 1.3, 1.4, the SKR Pro 1.1 and 1.2, and the GTR. I know have jumpers. Other boards by Big Tree Tech, some of them don't. I don't want to say all. So let's see what goes on with this one real quick. I gotta figure out where I am. So I'm gonna go over to the desktop. I'm gonna open the drive, see what's going on drive D. We have firmware.cur. So let's try loading that, and I'm just gonna take a shortcut. I'm gonna go over here, search on motherboard. Whoop. And I believe you change this to a 1, and then we have to change down here the platform INI to 1768. But let's double check that by first minimizing a bunch of this so we can see what we're talking about. Go to source, core, boards.h. Look for the MKS _ sGen. And there's the sGen L, and that's 68. So we're good there. So building might cause an issue, so let's first try building. I want to see if it actually bugs out, which it does. So you can see the issue. Now let's try a clean, because they have some stuff in memory, and then we'll rebuild. It may fail again. So now we got to figure out what the failure is. So it could be that we're actually using the COM port or something else. Let me just read through this real quick. Okay, I don't know what that is, but let's check on here. So connect. So it's not connecting. That's not good. But we were able to see the drive. So I'm just going to close this. I'm going to go over to Device Manager and see what's going on. Inside Device Manager, let's see if we have a COM port. We have COM port 12. That's why we couldn't connect in Pronterface. So let's see if there's actually a drive. There should be, which is right here. That's good. So the reason that it's not building, I'm not sure of yet. So I'll do another clean. And then I'll try and build again. And it's probably going to fail. So there's something going on that I don't understand just yet, but I'm sure we'll figure it out. So let's check to see what we got here. I'm actually going to do a regular build with the checkbox again. And so there seems to be an issue that I don't understand occurring in here. It says error motherboard is set in configuration.h. So let's go back there. So in configuration.h, motherboard I have set right here. That might not be right. So this is going to be easy to solve. We're going to go to boards.h. We're going to copy this because you can see that I put the version from down here. That's why we're having issues. So I'm going to minimize this, go to configuration.h, paste it over here, try it again, and it now does build because apparently I wasn't paying attention. So I'll check on the chat while this is going on. TMC 2208 on the MKS Gen L. I'll try that out in a second. So, no problem. So let's see. Let's try and upload now because it's not going to be on the drive. Let me just make sure you can see what I'm seeing. Okay. So I'm going to try upload. So it's uploading the drive because it buffered the build from before up in here. And that's why it can load so quick. So let's check to see if it's there. It is. So let's go back to the desktop and see if it actually loads. Now remember, we made changes to the end stop, so it's probably still going to be there. So let's go back over to the desktop over here. Open this folder. I've got to open up Fronterface. Now it's going to have the actual drive in here, so we don't have to check Device Manager. So I'll just connect, and you can see it's now online. Let's check the actual settings. So M119, it still says open because we have that change in there, so we know that it loaded. So let's try doing the TMC 2208, I think is what you were saying. I can do it on either board. I'll try both just to cover both, because I know there's 2 or 3 different conversations occurring in the chat. So the first one I'll do is, let's see, it's going to be on the V2 board. So I'll do TMC 2208. So there's a special chip for this one that they have. And I had some issues when I tried to use the SKR, or excuse me, the Big Tree Tech one. So I'm going to put something under this so it doesn't slide around on me. This is just non-conductive putty that's used for museums. It's just so that I can avoid the board slipping all over when I work with it. And then we need to power the board, which I'll do in a second, but we'll hold off on that. So I'm gonna connect this in just a sec after I figure out the jumper, which is already in place. But let's verify on the website. So if I go over to the the browser, inside the browser, we're going to go over to the TMC, or not the TMC, the page for, hang on, probably going to have to search on it again, MakerBase, MKS sGen, in this case it's SGen L v2, and we're gonna have to find the wiki. So we'll click over here. We're still in the v2. So down here it's gonna have the TMC 2208, and it's gonna say what jumper to jump, which is right here. So if you go over and you look on the desktop that I have, you can see I already have the jumper in position. So I need to grab a stepper. So give me a second to pry it out of storage here. And for those that don't know, I actually have a tutorial playlist where you can look a lot of this up. Well, that's not it. Hang on a second. Here they are. Apparently I put it away in the right drawer and opened the wrong drawer. So here's the actual stepper. You have to make sure that you place it in correctly and not backwards. So you need to know where the enable pin is, but I'll tell you for now, it's actually written on the back of the board for all the boards. Right here, it'll say where the enable pin is. And in this case, it's going to be in a corner of one of the solder marks, but it's hard for me to see from a distance. But I know where it is on the front side, which is right over here in the corner for every board. So it's right here on this board. And the enable pin for this one is over here, and they match it by colors as well. So now that we know that, I'm not going to actually use the heating fins for cooling right now because we're not going to be running it long. But I do need to pick something off this board that I didn't realize was on this side, and it's some of that actual putty that I use. It won't harm the board, but I use it for tutorials so that you don't watch me sliding all over the table with my actual work. So let me make sure it's all out of there, or at least moved off. There we go. So I'll pick this up, place it in here. We got to power the board. So to power the board, we don't need it for loading firmware, but we need it for running the stepper. And I'll turn the camera back on. Sorry about that. I use ferrule connectors, by the way. A lot of my tutorials should say where they are. And then I mark these with red and unmarked in this case so that I know where to connect these. So I know the connection's over here. So I'm going to loosen both of these. And then I'll slide them in, and this ensures a good connection and no shorts, or at least that's the working theory. But it's a safer way to work with the board. So that's now in there. It's still unplugged. In fact, I got to trace where the plug is, so give me a second. So there's evidence of it not being plugged in. I'll plug this in right here for this stepper. And now what I need to do is actually go over to VS Code. Let me just clean up the desk a little here. Excuse me. So inside VS Code, what we're going to need to do is actually make some changes. We're already good here, but we got to search on the A4988. That gets us in the neighborhood of where we want to be. Let me reduce this. We need to remove the comment. Then we need to find our stepper, which is TMC 2208. So we'll copy that. We'll paste it right here. Normally, you would change these to reflect what you're working with, but in this case, I'm not going to show you too much because I think there was something interesting on one of my previous streams with this, but I'll show you something. If you search on 800, this brings you to your stepper. Here is actually the micro steps. Normally you can increase them. I'll try it in a second after this, but that's what you need to set there. There's not going to be sensorless homing, but let's turn on debug. So let's search on TMC _ debug. We'll remove the comment right here. We'll find the next one and also remove the comment. That way we can actually use the debug command, which is M122, to see what the status is. So now that we've got that set up, we're not going to talk about the different modes that you can set these in. You can read about these on your own. And we're not using sensorless homing because it's the TMC 2208. So let's go back and try and load this again. And I'll check on the chat while this is going on. Okay, so I have an issue with the build. So let's see what's going on here. So at the moment, it might be a connection issue. So let's go over to Pronterface for a second. Let me make sure you can see what I'm doing. And we're currently possibly connected or not connected, excuse me. Now you'll see the issue when I do this. So I'll plug that in, and now I'll go back and try and compile. So I'm actually doing the upload or the right arrow down here. So as soon as this finishes, we'll actually see what pops. So it just finished. You can see the file. So we'll go back over to the desktop for a second. Disconnect the power from the USB. Reconnect the power from the USB. Double check again on the desktop. And make sure that it loaded, which it appears to have done because it's 1 minute later than we just talked about it. So on the workbench, I'm going to power it up. So I'm going to take the power and plug it in, and hopefully nothing will spark. So that's good. Let's go over to Pronterface and see what's going on. So we're going to try and connect. We're unable to connect, and the reason for that may be that we're not connected to the right COM port. So we're going to do a search on Device Manager real quick. Inside Device Manager, we're going to check to see what's there. It's 10. So we'll go over here, change this to 10 and connect. Now it's online, so we'll check the end stops. It says open at the moment, but we're going to do a M122 to check the status. Right now it says that there's a bad response. So I might have an issue with this particular stepper. So I'm going to power down the system for a second. Hang on, I got to make sure the cord doesn't fly all over the place. I'll bring you over so you can see what's going on. So sometimes there's soldering issues or other issues. So I'm going to de-energize the entire board. I'm going to pop this out, place it over here, grab a different one that I haven't used before. It's just coming out of the package, so I'm going to place this one back in right here. I'm going to re-energize the system with power. We'll go back into Pronterface. We'll disconnect, reconnect. It's now online. We'll check it again. And it's giving me a bad response. So we'll power it back down. We'll unplug the power, pull this out, and we'll check the jumper. So I'm going to take that out, examine it. Doesn't look bad, but I'm going to grab a different one and I'm going to plug it in, and I'm also going to double check to make sure that it's okay on their website. So let's go over to the website for a second. And it does say that it's going to be the third one down from the bottom, which it is. So we've changed that. Let's plug it back in and try it again. Whoop, let's put the board back in. Plug it in and power it back up. And let's try it again. So let's see what we got here. Disconnect, reconnect. So still a bad response. Super odd. It seems like I may have forgotten a step someplace. But let's see if it moves. So it moves, but it moves super fast. So there's something off there. So let's go back to the wiki and see what's going on. So in the wiki, let's see. We may need to enable EEPROM, which I don't think is a normal thing. The current value, they're not explaining this well. This is actually the square root of 2, but it's for root mean square. So I don't know what they're saying, but okay. So we could define hybrid threshold and this. I know there was something funky with this configuration. It might be the microsteps. So I'm going to go back and see what's going on. So I'll go over to VS Code. Inside VS Code, I'll see what I changed there. So I'm going to search on... That is unchanged. And then let's search on 800, or actually scroll back up. I'm gonna change this to 750. This might not fix anything, but let's try and disconnect from there. I'm actually disconnecting in Pronterface. You didn't see it, but I'm gonna try and upload. And we're going to go through each one of these things. It might be EEPROM is something that needs to be enabled for this. It's super weird. I know there's a setting that I'm forgetting from the past that makes this unique. So it loaded successfully. Let's double check it. So it's there. So let's power down the system. I'll show you how you have to do this. Take out the power. Take out the USB. Plug in the USB. It's loading the firmware as we speak. Now I'll plug it in. And let's go back and see if we can reconnect. I think I have an idea of what might be going on. So let's connect, check it again. Still says bad response. So let's disconnect. We're going to go over to VS Code. We're going to search on invert. Sorry, I'm looking for a particular setting for the end stop. I'm going to change this back to false. Just because that's something that I changed earlier. I'm going to search on EEPROM. EEPROM. And let's see what we can find. So there is a define EEPROM settings. Let's remove that for now. Hopefully that enables EEPROM. And let's try and upload again. And I'll check on the chat while this is going on. Okay, there's no questions yet. Or answers. So EEPROM is default on this board, so it might be that it needs it. So we're good there. Let's go back and take a look at the board. I'm going to disconnect the power. USB. Plug it back in, let it load, plug it in for regular power. Let's go to printer face, disconnect, reconnect, check it. Bad response still. That's awesome. So let's see if there's any clues. Not sure that's a good clue. Let's check to see how it moves. Still moving extremely fast. So let's go back. Let's disconnect here to VS Code, and let's check the website. So microsteps are set. Let's see, enable low speed stealth chop. That's hybrid mode. That's not normally gonna help unless it's already set in it. Very interesting. I don't want to crank up the actual amount on this. Sorry, I'm just reading through this real quick. Okay, well, that doesn't seem to be working very well. Not sure that's relevant. So it's only giving us a couple of settings to choose from. And we used a brand new stepper. Let's make sure that we have the pinouts right on this board. So search your repositories. And this is on the V2 board, right? Let's check something real quick here. Ah, painful. So, at least we know we can load firmware on something we're not supposed to. So let's go over here, core, boards, find the right board, copy it, minimize, configuration.h, paste it here, go over to the INI, change this to 6.9. Whoop. Apparently auto populates on. And let's try and load it. It's probably going to be capital letters, so let me change this. And let's try and load it. Hopefully it won't get too many issues. And we got some issues. So let's try it again. I never knew that you could load a 6.8 with a 6.9 build. Now we know. They're actually very similar chipsets, so maybe that's why. Okay, so that's loaded. Let's double check to make sure that it's actually in there. So we'll go to the D drive. It shows up. So we're going to go back to the workbench. Power it down. Remove the USB. Plug in the USB. Plug in the power. Go back to Pronterface. Connect to the device. Do an M122. And there was the error. It was the wrong chipset. So let's try and move. And it seems to be moving at a slower pace, which is nice. So apparently it was just me not realizing which board I'm on. So that's the first question. Sorry about the length of time to get to the answer. Somebody else was talking about another question, I think. Let's see. I have a V2 laying around. So I guess that covers those questions. Let me check on GitHub real quick here. Or not GitHub, sorry. I'm checking on my chat just to see if someone posted a message. Apparently between my phone and my computer I'm starting to have issues seeing what's coming in. But there's a lot of people now, so it's getting a little interesting for me. Anyways, we know it works there. I'm gonna unplug this for a second. Now we know why it doesn't work. So let's try the other board, and hopefully I'll remember to actually swap the board type this time. And EEPROM apparently has no factor on this problem, I believe. It's just me not selecting the correct board. So let me get this out of the way. Sorry, it's a little hot in my apartment, so the putty is breaking down on me. Apparently we're at about almost 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Nope, how I didn't say Celsius. Okay, that's cleaned off. So let's try the other board. Probably going to need to use the 8 gig on this one as well. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of trouble with the putty. So let me place that where you can see it. Actually, it has a drive in it, so that's good. I'm going to hook up the power. It's disconnected, obviously. You can see I get a little crazy with the coloring on purpose. That's so I don't make mistakes when I'm talking as much. There's the first one. Whoop. Let's do that again. And I'm using 12 volts, just so you know. During tutorials, I like to use that instead. It's the same jumper position, so we know we're in the good spot. Let's hook this up. That's good. Now we're going to actually have to load firmware, so we're going to have to change those two things. So let's go back over to VS Code real quick. Inside VS Code, we're going to change this to 6.8. And we're going to change the other one to the correct board that I'm talking about, which is right here. And I'm going to turn off the EEPROM stuff. Because I want to see if that works. So I just commented it out. Let's see what else we have in advanced configuration. That's not an issue, so we're good. So let's try uploading. This might fail, but that's okay. And while that's uploading, I'll double check to see if it's in the right category. Yeah, it's 6.8. So as soon as this completes, we'll try it again, see if it works. So let's check to see what it looks like first on the drive. And it's loaded, so let's try taking out the USB, plug it back in. Now we'll plug in the power. And we'll go over and check in Interface. Now it's going to be a different COM port like usual. So we'll search on device. And inside Device Manager, the COM port in this case is 12. So we'll change this. Whoop, there's 12. We'll connect. We're connected. We'll check M122. Looks like we're okay. So now we'll try and move it. And it doesn't move, and there's an obvious reason why. I'm going to power it down for a second so you can see. Details. So we'll reconnect the power. Disconnect, reconnect. And then we'll check the status again. That's good. And it moves perfectly fine. So, let's see if there's any other questions. So, let's see. Looks like I covered most of the questions you guys were asking so far. Are there other questions that you have? Apparently the updates on my phone are not that good for... Okay, so the person that is trying to send me a file sent it to me yesterday. I'm going to check that issue. So I'm going to go back over and grab them from Discord. So I'll show you what I'm doing so you can see it, because I'm trying to replicate what they're seeing, because I think there's an issue that we might be able to solve or at least quantify. So I'm going to go back up here. And let's see, they have 3 files or 2 files they sent me, platform.io and config.h. So I'm going to download both of those again. And I'm going to show you how I'm going to handle these in just a second. If they download, for some reason my computer is having trouble with download. So let's just say keep. And the other one's fine too, so it just popped up. So let's see what they're using, an LPC 1769. So let me disconnect the power here. I'm going to disconnect the USB as well. And this is a firmware load issue. So I'm going to open these both up. Now I don't have the 32 gig drive they're working with. So I'm going to move these over, get them out of the way. It's actually a... Let me show you what I'm doing. Pulling the board out for a second. Let me just clean up this mess. It's this board. Well, this putty is turning into a little bit of fun for me. It's normally not this viscous. So I got that out of the way. So what I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to check their firmware loading issue. It was an 8 gigabit drive here, but I'll show you how I set up the problem so I can understand it from their perspective. So I'm going to go over to the desktop. On the desktop, I'm going to close this for a second, go over to my downloads folder, and you see I have a bunch of stuff that apparently is in my downloads folder. I'm going to delete this, but before I can do that, I have to actually open this, close the folder. I'll minimize that again. Now I can delete this folder. Now I'm going to right click and I'm going to extract all. This might take a second, so I'll check on the chat real quick. So now that this is actually almost extracted, we'll copy these two files over our other files. Granted, I know what the LPC 1769 is in the platform io.ini, but I want to use the exact files. So I'm going to navigate down to where they are. So as you can see, we have config.h. I'm going to delete that, and then I'm going to look for the other one, which isn't present yet. So that one's kind of hard for me to work with if I don't know where it is, but there it is. So I'm going to delete it, but I'm going to open up a second folder so that we can actually do this easily. So I'm going to go to the downloads folder. Let me move this over a little. I'm going to copy it over the other one, so replace it. Go to the Marlin folder and take the other one and copy it here. So we're good there. So next thing I need to do is actually go into VS Code. Give me a second to bring it up here. There we go. I'm going to go to Open Folder, Downloads, first Marlin, second Marlin, select folder. His configuration should be loaded already. So we'll go to configuration.h. You can see that this one was left open, so it's LPC 1769. So Marlin, config.h, search on motherboard. Motherboard looks correct. It's -1, so that's good. So let's try and load this default configuration. Let's just make sure the drive appears currently. So currently I don't see a drive because I'm unplugged. So I'll show you what I'm talking about. So I'm going to plug this in. Right now my drive does appear, I believe. Let's just give it a second. There it is. So let's go and try and upload that. Let's make sure we're disconnected in here. So it's not connected. So we're going to go over to VS Code and we're going to press the upload button. So this is technically the exact same configuration they're working with minus the config advanced.h. So if there's a problem that they're seeing and I can replicate it here, I might be able to file compare out the problem. So let's see what happens. Okay, looks like it uploaded, so let's check on the drive. The drive has it, so this is where things might get a little weird. So let's go over to the workbench, disconnect the power, reconnect the power, give that a second to load, and then we'll check on the computer to see if we see it. So on the computer, we'll go over to the D drive if we can see it, which we don't. So that's weird. So there's an issue that appears to be appearing with this firmware load at this moment. So I'll show you how to correct it. Let me just make sure that I don't see anything in Device Manager. So I'm going to have a feeling you're going to see the COM ports, but you're not going to see the rest of it. So inside here, I'll go over to the COM ports. We have one for 10. Let's see if we have a drive. It says we have a Marlin drive, but we don't see anything. So let's try refresh. So F5. We still don't see anything. So apparently the drive has disappeared. So let me go over to the workbench for a second. Disconnect the drive. Reconnect the drive. Give that a second to hopefully show up on the computer, which it's not. So we now have narrowed the problem to the actual firmware load. Now there's something odd going on with this particular firmware load. I don't know if there's a setting I don't know about. So the next thing we can do is we can go back over to our web browser. And I'll show you what I'm going to do actually first over here so that it doesn't look like I'm doing anything hinky. So I'm going to click on downloads. I'm actually going to delete this. That's the Marlin zip file that I just downloaded. And this at the moment, I'm actually going to delete as well. Just so you can see, well, I can't delete it until I actually go into here. So I have to disconnect. And so now that I have that resolved, I can go back over to here, delete this folder, and it's gone. So we're starting from scratch. So I'm going to go over to Marlin's website. I'm going to go over to the downloads. I'm going to grab the most current download. Whoop, sorry, I hit the wrong button. It's this one. I'm going to say OK. This is going to take a few seconds to download to our downloads folder, which is over here. So as you can see, I tried to download twice, which is real smart. So I'm going to right click. I'm going to extract all. It says it can't complete. So let's stop for a second. Try it again. Apparently I'm having issues because it says 0. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to delete both these. Okay, there's something going on with the download, so let's go over and check on that. So I'm going to close the web browser for a second. And I'll pull in a different browser. Just give me a second to pull one up. Inside here, let's do download. Grab it this way. Okay, it looks like it's downloading. It's going to take a few seconds. Apparently I have to work on something with the channels on my, router. Because I think someone's using a duplicate channel. That's why you're seeing all this slow downloads occurring. So we'll give that a second and I'll read comments. Let's see. So when I run or send M122, all steppers are not enabled. You're going to have to be more specific with not enabled. Do you mean that you haven't enabled all, or they're saying that they're not functional? And then let's see. I have dual Z stepper motors with TMC 2209 driver. Motors get hot and unsynced. What should I do? What you could do is run it off of one particular stepper. Or you could try a different stepper. Like for the Z axis, sometimes it's good to use the DRV 8825. It's a cheaper stepper. It's about $1 or $2. And that doesn't get as hot, but you're gonna have to learn to calibrate it. And there's a calibration video on my website under the MKS sGen, or excuse me, the MKS Gen L tutorial series. And for those that don't know what my website is, it's edwardbrayman.com. And I'm still working on it. I just built it over the last couple of days, and I know it needs a lot of work, but at least the tutorials are up there for your convenience. So now that that's totally downloaded, I'm going to go over to my downloads folder, and inside my downloads folder I'm going to right click, and I'm going to extract all. This may take a second as well. Apparently I haven't had so many computer issues in the last couple weeks that I have to actually sit down and think about, but I think it has to do with communication mostly. That, and I'm running several things at once, so the computer doesn't seem to like it. So I'm going to download this fresh copy. All I'm going to change in this fresh copy is a couple of things. So I'm going to go over to VS Code. I'm going to go to File Explorer, Open Folder. I'm going to go to my Downloads folder, open up the two Marlin folders, select the folder. Inside here, I'm just going to click on Marlin, Source, Core, Boards.h. I'm going to search on on MKS _ sGen, and that's the sGen L version 2. So I'm going to copy it. Then I'm going to minimize source and core, go to configuration.h. I'm going to search on motherboard. I'm going to paste it over here. Then the only other change is change this to -1. Then I'm going to go to platformio.ini. I'm going to change this to LPC 1769. I'm going to just do the build with the checkbox. And then I'm going to pop out the actual power on my board. And while this is building, I'll show you what I'm doing. I'm going to pop out the drive. I'm going to insert the drive inside here. Then put this in the computer. Now that that's complete, I'll go back over to VS Code. I'll click on the, not GitHub folder, the .pio folder, the LPC 1769. I'll find my build, right click on it, reveal in Explorer. Then you can see that I have a D drive because I'm connected through the USB converter. So I'm going to go back over here, right click, send this to my D drive. Then I'm going to check on my D drive, and as you can see, I have a fresh build that was, just now. So I'm going to pop that out and pop it back into the board. This is also a good way to recover things when you have issues. This board should be able to connect no problem. So let's slide this in, then connect it. So inside here, we've now loaded the firmware. So let's go over and check on the computer to see what's going on. So over here, it just popped as a drive by itself, and it just loaded. So we know we're good there. So now we got to figure out what's going on with his particular build. So I'm going to go over to Discord, and on Discord I'm going to download configuration.h, and I'll show you what I'm going to do. So I'm going to minimize, or actually I'm going to pull up the drive. I'm going to go to downloads. Let me get this out of the way. And here's his configuration.h. So I'm going to rename that. We'll just call it, if I can click correctly, other. That's so that I don't have a duplicate file issue. I'm going to copy that, go to the config, go to here, go to Marlin, paste it right here. Now you can see that there's two files. Let's see if we can alphabetize them. There we go. Well, not well. So I'm going to click on one, then the other, right click. I'm going to go to Tortoise SVN, do a diff. And here's the first diff that we come across. This might be an issue that's causing it. Over here, we've got no difference here, but we have a difference here. I don't know if that's causing it. It might be interfering with another configuration for 0. but it's also commented out, so the only thing that would probably affect it is right here and here, or here, sorry, when I highlight things, everything gets highlighted for define. So let me see if I can click off it. There we go. So we'll see if we can recause this issue. So we have power supply as another thing that's uncommented here, but not here. That's another possible thing we could look into. Our temperature sensor is probably not an issue. In his file, there's additional configurations that don't exist in the default configuration. We have a different max bed temperature. That's probably not the issue. Extruder max temp, probably not the issue. And then we have all this additional stuff for delta. So it looks like he's using an examples file for his particular configuration, whereas I'm using the plain vanilla Marlin config file. So they may have done something in here that's causing issues. You can see there's a difference right here with the actual mins. Then down here there's inverting, which probably is not causing an issue. You can see what steppers they're using. There's probably no issue there. Although I wouldn't use a TMC 2209 on the extruder, only because there's no end stop and it does sensorless homing, so you're going to have to clip the pin to actually use that without damaging the board, possibly. I don't know if that's true, but according to the directions for the SKR, they like you to clip the pin. That's why I'm saying that. Mine doesn't have delta in the configuration. Then if you look through here, you can see that these are different. Not sure what's going on here, but it's probably something for the delta configuration. So everything's a little bit different. Unsure of what that means. They may have just broke this out into separate settings. Obviously the speeds are different. Looks like the jerk value might be slightly different. And then there's additional stuff down here. But my guess, whoop, no, that has nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with it. This shouldn't have anything to do with it. But it is a different config file. So as you can see, it's kind of hard for me to understand what's going on without building it up from scratch. So I'm going to do maybe the law of averages and take half the file and see what's going on, because maybe we can cause it. So I'll show you what that is in a second. I'm just going to finish reading through here, because we know this file is probably the one to blame, but we'll check the other one to see in just a second. There's stuff about fan speed, probably not the issue. SD support is enabled, whereas mine's disabled. Probably not the issue, but could be, because I know they were working on that for other boards, like the MKS, or excuse me, the SKR Pro. There's an issue with the LCD screen and the SD drive, but I don't think they put that change into the actual release build yet, so you won't see that change. And then there's some more stuff changed down here. This looks like a display change. I know this can be somewhat boring, but I have to go through each thing. So my guess is we could start with what's uncommented that's different. So over here, that's not uncommented, so we're gonna leave it alone. Those look the same, so I'm not gonna touch those. We could try this one. I don't think it's gonna break it. It's just something that you might see on the LCD. but I'm trying to use an educated guess, so give me a second here to see. Let's try this one right here, because I have a funny feeling this setting might be causing the issue. Did I actually manage to get it across? I might have to copy it by hand. Give me a second. Oh no, I switched the order. Sorry about that. It's been a while since I've used this, so here we go. This is the line I want to move. So all I'm going to do is copy it, or I'm going to uncomment it. So I'm going to do this. I'm just going to copy that word, go over to VS Code. We're going to do one more default load to see what's going on. So I'm going to go over here and I'm just going to change the end stop just so we know it's working. On configuration.h. Whoop, I'm all over the place. Give me a second here. There we go. So I'm going to change this just to make sure it's working. I'm going to do an upload real quick, and we'll see what happens on the board. So this is what I'm looking at over in here. I want to see something pop in a second, and I'll check on the chat while that's going on. If the motors are getting hot, it's usually too much current. And somebody already said that, thank you. Okay, so you can see that it actually loaded. So let's try and check it real quick on the desktop. Sorry I'm hopping around here, but I'm trying to see what this problem is. Apparently my screen doesn't want to jump like it normally does, so I'll do it that way. So I'll unplug this, plug it back in. I'll go back over to the desktop. I'll enlarge this so you can see, and it loaded. So there's no issue yet. So now let's go back into VS Code and search on that setting. Okay, it's right here. So I'm going to remove the comment and see if this is the issue. Not sure if it's going to happen. This might be uncommented as well, so let's check it. So there is no change here, so probably it won't affect anything, but it is uncommented, so let's see what happens. So let's load this. And let me see if I can bring up the actual folder so you can see both happening at the same time. There it is. So it loaded at the moment. So let's go over to the desktop, unplug it, plug it back in. It sounds like something's happening. Let me see if I can go back into my here. Okay, so let's go to that folder. So that wasn't what caused the issue, so let's go back over here. Let's ignore this. So there's something in this file possibly causing the issue. I could start copying over things by half and seeing what's happening, but it's easier probably to download a fresh copy of Marlin, extract it, and then build it up from scratch. That way when you trip over that one particular setting that's knocking out your USB, you can see it. But let's check the other folder. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to go back over to the actual downloads folder. And I'm going to download the other thing, being the platform.io.ini, and see if this causes the issue. So let's see if I can get this to download. Let's bring up this folder. So in this case, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to close this folder. I'm going to minimize this. I'm going to copy this file, and I'm going to overwrite mine to see what happens. So I'm going to paste it right here. And this is just to get an idea of what's happening. It could be in this file that there's something that's an issue. So I'm going to minimize that, go back over to VS Code, reopen it, go to Downloads, open the first folder, second folder, click on that. Now I'm going to try and upload again, but I'm going to actually change the configuration.h for the end stop again so we can confirm that we're doing this. So invert, I'm going to change this one to true. This is just so I can track what's happening. And then I'm going to try upload after I double check this. So we're not connected at the moment, so it doesn't matter. So I'm going to do an upload because we're trying to cause the error. So we're trying to narrow down where it is, and I'm trying to use a 50-50 rule. I call it a bubble sort, where you take half the problem, cut it in half, find where the problem is, then cut that problem in half again. So I do it by, right now I'm checking just the files at the file level. So now that I'm over here, I'm going to go to the D drive. It looks like it uploaded, so let's go back over to the desktop. I know I'm talking really fast, but I'm trying to get through figuring out what this issue is. So I'm going to disconnect here, reconnect, give this a second, and then we'll go back over to the computer and see what's happening. So on the computer, we still have a D drive. So we know that's not the issue. So we're going to cut this problem in half again, and we're going to basically figure out what's going on. But I'm going to double check by connecting to this drive. So I'm going to connect. It says I have an issue connecting. So that's interesting. So let's go over and see what that issue is. So I'm going to have to do Device Manager. And Device Manager likes to jump to the other screen on me, so it's kind of hard to keep up. It's COM port 10 now. Let's see if we actually have a drive. Looks like we do. So let's double check over here. Looks like we have a drive. Let's just click off and on and again. It's still there. So let's try connecting to 10. We're connected. Let's check the end stop status. They're both open. So we know that the issue is probably not in the platform io.ini. Now we need to check what's going on with the other half of the file. So I'm going to go back to File Compare and see if I can resolve this problem once and for all. So I'll go to my Downloads folder, my Marlin folder, go in here, and I'm just going to cut the problem in half. So I'm going to go into Marlin, I'm going to highlight this and this, right click, go to Tortoise SVN, do a diff, and I'm going to go through here. This is probably not an issue. That's probably something caused by me or spacing between the file that he's using. But if there's 2 up here and then 2 down here, that closes off the comment. So there's usually not an issue with that. So let's find where the diffs are. So there's a diff here. Interesting. No diffs that I'm seeing yet. So let's try this one. So we're only going to pick a couple things. And there should be an arrow. There we go. That'll copy it over. If I'm clicking the right one, hang on a second, I might have these backwards. It's the other. So let me reverse the order of these so that I'm not confused. Don't save. There we go. So let's start with this. This is not going to make a difference because it's commented out. This shouldn't make a difference either because it's commented out, but let's do it. And we'll do this, and then we'll try and reload again. So I know that I have VS Code open, so let's see if those changes occurred. So the changes didn't occur yet. So I'm going to close this real quick. Then go back over here and I'm going to hit save. And then we're going to go back into VS Code and see if they changed. Okay. It's going to take a second to load because it's doing its thing. So you can see that there's a change here. Because the other configuration I copied it over. And there's a change here that I copied over. Or did not copy over, sorry. Let me do that. So I'm actually just going to copy this line in a second. I just want to see what happens with the build. I don't think anything will yet. But let's look around and make sure there's no changes. See, the machine name is still the same, but we still have 0 here. And over in here for the other, you can see that it's 0 and it's 0, so there should be no change there actually. So let's move down through here and try some stuff. Let's go over here and find it. I think it's right there. And let's try a build and upload real quick. That's just a build, sorry about that. I'll try the upload right after that. And let me check on the chat while this is going on. Okay, so this is almost uploaded. So far we haven't been able to see the issue. We'll find out in a second if there is one. Looks like it didn't upload. That probably is because we're connected. So here we need disconnect, minimize this, and also I did the checkbox not build. So let's click on there and I'll bring up that folder again. Looks like it just loaded. So let's go over to the desktop, see what's going on. Let's take the power out, power it back in. Okay, let's go back over to the computer. On the computer, let's go to the folder. Let's expand this out. We can still see the D drive, so it means it loaded probably. So we know that's not the issue. So let's go back over and I'm going to minimize this for a second by closing it. Go to the file compare, load the changes. Click on something to get off that, and let's see what the compares say. So that space and that space are not going to make a difference. So these are probably not going to make a difference, but let's copy them over just in case. Okay. This is something that's commented out, so it shouldn't make any difference. Let's bring this over. Let's bring this over. We're not going to bring that over just yet, but we'll bring this over. We'll bring these over. These I don't want to touch, but we'll touch those later. This is a comment, so it doesn't matter. This doesn't exist in my configuration yet, so I'm going to skip that. I'll copy this over because they're similar. I'll do the same with this because they're similar. I'll copy this over because it's similar. And I won't copy that over yet because it's not similar. This I'll copy over because it's similar. It's probably for the BL Touch. This I'll copy over because it's similar. This I'll copy over because it's similar again. This I'll skip because it's Delta. And I'll skip, these are just comments anyways, most of them. These are all Delta related. And then this I'll copy over because it's similar because we're not using basically this functionality yet. And I'll save that and then we'll try again. So I go over here, I'm going to open. I'm going to go to my downloads, Marlin 2, select. We'll double check what we changed. I'm guessing it's, see if we can do a Control Z. Okay, so that's where we were last. So let's check on this value in the file. So let's go over here, do a Control F, paste. It has changed. So let's try another upload, and I'll check on the chat in a second. Now we got errors all over the place, so let's see what those are. So use xmin plug when homing. Sorry, I'm trying to copy it and it's not copying. So let's do a search. So we're just going to change this back and this back for the moment. It might cause other issues, but let's try it. Because the Delta configuration is actually using possibly maxes. But for now I don't want to mess around with that too much. I'm just trying to find the issue. So now that we're here, let's go over and check. It looks like it loaded. So let's minimize that for a second, go over to the desktop again. Pull the plug, reconnect the plug. And then we'll go back over to the computer. Open a folder. Look for the drive. Drive is still good, so we know that's not the issue. So there is something in here that's causing the issue. So let's start with moving that over. I'm not going to mess with the actual configuration here. These shouldn't have an effect on it. But let's see what we got here. We got something weird going on with this config file. So let's try this. Most of it's commented out, but let's see what happens. So let's save that. And then let's just see if it changed. So it's not changed yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close out of here. Go back over here. I'm going to do a save. So we're good there. So let's go back, reopen it. Do a search on what we just changed. It's changed. Let's do another upload. Of course, we have issues again with end stops. So use xmin plug. So there's a lot of settings that have been changed between the files. And for me to show you all of the changes or what's going on is going to take a while. But I can tell you that that file has an issue in it, and that it might be easier to build it up piece by piece, because it's going to take me a while to find the issue, but I know it's in there, and it's probably just one setting. So I hope that answers a question. It's getting kind of late here. I think I started at 3 o'clock and we're almost 2 hours in. So I'm going to end it in a couple minutes. But just so you know, there is probably an issue with that file. Try a different config file for the moment and see if it actually loads. So if no one has any other questions, I'll let you go, and I'll get caught up on making some tutorials, hopefully on the right particular board that I'm talking about. And so for those that have been leaving super chats, thank you very much. It's greatly appreciated, as well as the PayPal people and the people on Patreon. I appreciate you all. It's very helpful for offsetting the costs to do these. And everyone take care, be safe, remember to get your shots, and I'll talk to you Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you very much.